Quiero partir presentándome. Mi nombre es Francisco Correa, soy agregado comercial de ProChile en Los Ángeles. Voy en nombre de ProChile y los programas Plan C y Contact Chile. Queríamos agradecerles que estén acá escuchando. Vamos a tener a dos grandes expositores del emprendimiento y la innovación, así que qué mejor manera de poder cerrar este gran evento Lab 4+. También estamos en streaming, así que un saludo para todos los que nos están viendo por allá también. Vamos a tener a dos grandes exponentes del emprendimiento y la innovación. A lo mejor algunos de ustedes ya pudo tener contacto con ellos, si no, vamos a tener la gran oportunidad de poder escuchar todo lo que han hecho y llegarnos muy buenas ideas de cómo poder potenciar dos grandes temas. El primero, vamos a hablar con Jason Best, que nos va a explicar todo lo que es el desarrollo del crowdfunding y cómo lo podemos aplicar a la Alianza del Pacífico. Y posteriormente vamos a estar conversando con Peter Lewis, quien es a cargo de toda la organización del Festival Internacional South by Southwest. Vamos a partir primero con Jason, contarle un poco sobre él. Jason es cofundador y director de Crowdfunding Capital Advisors. Es coautor del marco de inversión de crowdfunding utilizando el Jobs Act para legalizar la equidad, la crowdfunding de capital y deuda en Estados Unidos. Trabaja con grupos de ángeles, firmas de private equity y venture capital, además de gobiernos y organizaciones no gubernamentales, entre ellas el Banco Mundial. Él es también un exitoso empresario de la tecnología sanitaria, con 2 empresas en San Francisco. Participó en el equipo de liderazgo ejecutivo de Kinesis Software, que se clasificó por Inc. Magazine como una de las compañías privadas de más rápido crecimiento en los Estados Unidos por 2 años consecutivos. Obtuvo su MBA en Thunderbird School of Management, en su programa MBA. Una persona que tiene un currículum tremendo y está en un tema muy, muy candente a nivel mundial. Así que, sin más, lo quiero dejar con Jason Best.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to do a couple of things today. I thought I could start, I was asked to sort of talk about some of the research work that we did for the World Bank on using crowdfund investing in developing economies. And what I want to do is I want to present this in a way of presenting it to entrepreneurs focused on how you can use this to give you some of the talking points and some of the arguments that you can use in talking with people that you'll be people who you may want to talk with in your countries about this opportunity. Many times when people start to think about or first hear about crowdfunding or crowdfund investing, they think of it as sort of a crazy idea. And typically there's an education process that takes some time to do. And so what I want to do is share some of our experience and some of the research that we've done in a way that hopefully will make this education process easier for you in the countries of the Pacific Alliance. I can just say that I believe that the countries of the Pacific Alliance have an incredible opportunity to use this mechanism for really adding a new layer to the private capital markets. It really is a bridge between what is happening with entrepreneurship training and education and support through the institutions and the accelerators that we have throughout the 4 countries, and up to getting into angel and venture capital investment. So, sorry this is so small, but typically what we talk about with crowdfunding is the fact that the sort of rewards-based crowdfunding that Kickstarter and Indiegogo use a lot, and also IDEMA and there are other platforms throughout Latin America. Really, the majority of those are funding up to about $50,000 US. And then there's this gap we all know a lot about because we've all experienced it, where you can't get money usually until you have a going business. And finding investors is always a challenge. And the investor wants to see traction. The investor wants to see the fact that you can execute and then you have a customer for your business. Really important, really valid reasons. And so what we believe is that crowdfunding has the opportunity to allow you to demonstrate the fact that you have a customer and demonstrate that you can execute. The 2 biggest success factors for most entrepreneurs, number 1 is can you execute, number 2, can you raise money? And we think crowdfunding can give you an opportunity to do both. There are obviously a lot of crowdfunding platforms around the world. The current count's over 750. And so they're in a number of countries, and obviously here in Chile we have Cumplo, and also we have Brota. And so they're in many other countries as well. So this is just a way to, kind of a visual model for how to think about kind of what crowdfunding is, because honestly, it's really, there's not a lot new with crowdfunding. It's the way that people have raised money for businesses for hundreds of years. It's just doing it with the internet. It's friends and family financing, but you doing it in a way that scales and in a way that is more transparent and in a way that is easier to manage. And so really there's been this, initially it's this kind of flow from here's the new venture and the entrepreneur, and here's their community that they've gone to traditionally. When you put this crowdfunding infrastructure in, which is the social web and a crowdfunding platform, it allows you to expand your community, so you can use LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook to reach more people more efficiently. And it allows for increased transparency and trust. So those are the two main currencies, really, with crowdfunding, is transparency and trust. And that's what's missing a lot of times from a lot of transactions. And so we believe the social web actually enhances that, makes that easier, and should be, I think by regulators also. When we talk to regulators and we talk to governments about this, what we tell them, because it's true, is that the transparency that you get from crowdfunding does not exist today in the private capital markets. Typically, all the transactions that they worry so much about are happening behind closed doors. And with these transactions will take place and do take place on crowdfunding platforms that are in databases that they then have access to. So they have a much better idea what's actually happening with these companies than ever before. Just this slide is, you guys already know this. It's just basically that different kinds of crowdfunding based on the size of the business that you are. And obviously crowdfund investing, where you're actually issuing equity or taking on debt from individuals, is really kind of the new piece. So the issue here is we said, okay, if we look around the world where we've seen crowdfund investing be successful, what are the key success factors? What's the environment need to be so that you have fertile ground for this to flourish and this to function well? Number one, social media penetration. Number two, stability of the banking system, stability of markets. Internet use, mobile adoption, a lot of early stage entrepreneurial activity, meaning there's already a market for this to take place. And education, well-educated citizens. And so all of those things in the upper right corner there. And I would suggest that those are things that are all in abundance in the Pacific Alliance countries. Those things all exist, and so I think it could be well suited. Obviously, a lot of what we talk about in this model is risk, and how do you reduce risk? And so just some of the things that you can't see here because the typing's too small, really are how can a government and a regulator manage this effectively? And there's a number of things you can do, and there are a number of things we did with the Jobs Act in the US. So things like you have to regulate the crowdfunding platforms to begin. So to be able to have a crowdfunding platform, that should be regulated by the government. You need ongoing government oversight. There should be background checks of the entrepreneurs. There should be utilization of your social network, because one of the big issues people say is, well, how do I know that these companies are real? How do I know they're going to deliver? How do I know I can trust them? Well, when we look at the data on what's happened in crowdfund investing, it's been live and working in Australia for 8 years. It's been live and working in England for 4 years. We can see that 80% of the money that is invested by individuals, invested in entrepreneurs by other individuals, they already have a pre-existing relationship with them. So they're either a first or second degree LinkedIn connection. So this concept that millions of people are going to be throwing money at strangers over the internet just doesn't really work. What actually happens is, in the crowdfund investing side of things, between 75 and 100 people are investing between $2,500 and $5,000 in dollar terms. And they're doing that with people that most of the time they have some connection to, whether it's geographic connection, professional relationship, or whatever. And so, so a couple of other data points. In the UK, there's a platform called Funding Circle. They've been running now for 4 years. They have facilitated the transfer, or the lending, of 175 million British pounds from individuals to SMEs and startups in England. And that's come from about 65,000 individuals. So about 1% of the population of the UK has done that. The British government was so frustrated with the fact that banks were not lending to SMEs, regardless of how many new plans they came out with, that they have now just started investing directly in the loans on this crowdfunding platform. So in certain sectors that they have selected as important, they will take the last 20% of every loan in that whole portfolio. So it has allowed them to deploy over 50 million British pounds. And they were never able to have that impact before through banks. And so it's a way to really, for the government to have very direct impact. The other benefit is that you have, it's difficult for governments to go from like the 50,000 foot level all the way down to making the decisions about exactly which entrepreneur, is the right one to give, money to. But if that entrepreneur has had to go out and raise capital from their community and demonstrate there's a customer, demonstrate they've got traction, or demonstrate that they have people who back them, then it's easier for the government to be a co-investor, to sort of take that, to help them across the finish line so they can go. Really 4 key elements in a crowdfunding system becoming effective. You have to have all 4 of these. And again, I think that Pacific Alliance countries have this opportunity. One, an entrepreneurial culture, and the fact that there's been a lot of energy put into that. Community engagement through online interactions. Technology, the presence of social media, internet penetration, and other things. And then finally, just an economic regulation. This is always the hard part, is how do you get the regulation right to allow this to happen? And so in the report, we made a lot of recommendations to governments about what they should do if they wanted to really kind of move forward with this. And you can get this full report on our website if you want, and you can kind of have a look at it or share it with others if you want. But I want to just sort of kind of finish up, for the most part, with a few things to give you some tangible examples of how this really works. So first of all, this really is again, a new form of finance, a new way to think about the private capital markets. And so instead of trying to say this is a totally different thing that's going to go around all the existing infrastructure and all the work that's gone in, let's think about how we incorporate it. We put it into the work that's already been done in this space. So number one, the public and private partnership. The example of that is the example I gave earlier about the British government and what they're doing in taking the last 20% of the loans in these certain sectors that they want to. Again, it's a chance to leverage this creativity that's going on in the private sector and to then utilize that money more effectively. Accelerators and co-working spaces. I mean, for example, with Fundación Chile or the other kind of co-working spaces and other accelerators that are all over the region, you could use crowdfund investing or crowdfunding in several ways. One would be, it could be one of the criteria that is used to judge whether or not you're accepted into the accelerator. Because if the second most important thing is you have to be as an entrepreneur as a good fundraiser, then maybe you should have to raise a little bit of money to get into the accelerator to demonstrate that you can do that. Or the other challenge happens many times is that the entrepreneur has a hard time getting those investors so they can exit the accelerator and back into the real world and start selling. And so in those cases, you could use crowdfunding as a bridge to help the people to exit those accelerators. And then finally, just these new financial structures. I think for people who say, this is new, this is different, this is not the way we do things, the reality is that, all of these things are new. Venture capital was started 30 years ago in Silicon Valley because the banks and the private equity groups were not doing a good job of helping businesses begin. Angel groups, the venture capitalists thought angel investors were crazy people for what do they know about how to invest money. And now they're an established part of the ecosystem. And in the future, the very near future, crowdfunding investing will be just another part of the private capital market. It'll be just another part of how this gets done. And the reason I believe that this sort of waterfall of stuff has happened is because information has become easier and easier to get access to, right? And so back when you had to have a printed book to understand what the results of a financial corporation were 50 years ago, fewer people had access to that information, so fewer people could make good decisions. Now we live in the age of the real-time web. Now more people have instant access to the same information, giving them better opportunities to make good decisions. So just a couple things at the end here, really looking at the market size, because the World Bank asked us to do some estimates on market size. And so the size of the circle is the size of the market opportunity. Some focus here. Oh, that's better. So the size of the market, and then this, the darker part of these circles demonstrates sort of social media penetration, because that's the most important factor. And so LATAM and Caribbean are very well positioned, and when you look at it this way, sort of what the projections could be over the course of 10 to 15 years, that really excluding China, the LATAM is number 2 right behind Europe for the potential. So that's nearly $11 billion worth of funding that could take place. And so, there's a lot that's possible. I think I want to leave some time for any questions you guys have, but the one thing I would just say is that the work that we did on the Jobs Act and the work that we did in making this legal, there were 3 of us and in the beginning, and we built a coalition of people, and we worked with a lot of folks to get it done. And I would just say that, one of the things that sometimes people say is, well, that can't happen here, and there's usually a few reasons why that they follow that statement with. And I would suggest it can happen anywhere. I would suggest that it will happen, and it's just a matter of time of how long it will take, because this is, this is a new form of capital that will move forward. One story about the process, and I'll turn it over for questions. We've been doing the work for several months. We were successful at getting about 95% of the House of Representatives to pass the bill, and we then had to get the Senate involved. And so we tried to have a rally, and we thought we'd have a rally of entrepreneurs. And we thought maybe we could get 100 people to show up. Maybe we could do something to try to get some attention. And we had positioned ourselves so that the rally was going to happen between the train station that people use to come to work in the Senate and the Senate offices. And this was in November in Washington, D.C. And it was raining and snowing, and the wind was blowing, and it was like 20 degrees, and this was at 7 in the morning. And so it was completely miserable outside. We had 12 people show up. 12. It was like the worst rally ever. It was so pathetic. And we had, but then like the press also showed up. And so they wanted to see what was going on. But the thing was, so we were convinced that this was going to just die, and nothing's going to happen, and this is crazy. So 2 staffers were walking by, and I guess they just out of pity, they asked what we were doing and what was our focus and why are we there, and we talked to them. And independently, they kind of each handed me the card and said, okay, so when you're done with this, just stop by the office and want to talk some more and find out what this is all about. And so we went to their offices, and we spent about an hour each in each of those 2 offices of the senators. And those are 2 of the 3 senators that co-sponsored the Jobs Act in the Senate, and that pushed really hard to make it happen. And so it was like at that moment where we thought this was over was exactly the moment that we met the people who were going to help actually carry this across the finish line. And so it's just one of those kind of entrepreneurial moments where out of the darkest depths of this is never going to work, sometimes good news happens. So anyway, I look forward to your questions, and I really appreciate having the chance to share this with you. supuesto.